Hello everyone, in this video we will discuss aggravating circumstances under Article 14. Now if you look at your Article 14, aggravating circumstances, you will see there the different aggravating circumstances at madami sila. Ito yung pinakamadami sa GMAA. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, hanggang 21. So you don't have to memorize them. Ang kailangan lang ninyo is you look at the keywords. For example, sa number 1, advantage be taken by the offender of his public position. So ibig sabihin, ang offender dito ay public officer. Sa number 2, that the crime be committed in contempt of or with insult to public authorities. So, ang offended party dito ay mga public authorities. That the act be committed with insult or in disregard of the respect due to the offended party on account of his rank, age, sex. Or, yung crime na yon na-commit sa dwelling ng offended party. Or sa number 4, that the act be committed with abuse of confidence or obvious ungratefulness. So, dito, pinagkatiwalaan ka niya, pero inabuso mo yung tiwala niya or obvious ungratefulness. Pinapakain ka na nga, kinagat mo pa yung kamay niya. So again, hindi mo na kailangang memorizing siya word per word. Just look at the meaning at saka yung mga keywords nila. So again, there are 21 aggravating circumstances. Now, what are aggravating circumstances? Those which, if attendant in the commission of the crime, serve to increase the penalty without, however, exceeding the maximum of the penalty provided by law for the offense. Now, kapag merong aggravating circumstances, it will increase the penalty. So, ano bang ibig sabihin natin yan? Now, if you look at Article 64, nakalagay dyan na, in cases in which the penalties prescribed by law contain 3 periods, the courts shall observe the following rules. Like for example, sa reclusion temporal, which is the penalty for homicide. Now, itong reclusion temporal, under Article 76, it is a divisible penalty. Kasi sa Article 76, may table dyan. So, tignan nyo lang, kasama dyan ang reclusion temporal. At kapag divisible penalty siya, under Article 76, it is divided into 3 parts called periods. Minimum, medium, and maximum. So, kung titignan natin itong reclusion temporal, it is divided into 3 periods. Under Article 76, minimum period, medium period, and maximum period. Now, under Article 64, ito ang rule. Number 1, when there are neither aggravating nor mitigating circumstances, they shall impose the penalty prescribed by law in its medium period. In other words, kung walang mitigating at walang aggravating, nasa medium period siya. Ang penalty ay reclusion temporal in its medium period. Ngayon naman, sinabi natin na kapag merong aggravating circumstance, it will serve to increase the penalty. So kung titignan natin ulit, kapag merong aggravating, it will increase the penalty by imposing reclusion temporal in its maximum period. That is how you increase the penalty. At nakalagay din dito sa definition ng aggravating circumstances, without however exceeding the maximum of the penalty. So kahit pa gaano kadami ang aggravating circumstances, kahit pa merong 2, 3, or 4, even if there is more than one aggravating circumstance, hindi siya mag-i-exceed sa maximum period, for example, ng reclusion temporal. Yan ang effect ng aggravating circumstance. Kaya, nakalagay dito na, it will serve to increase the penalty without, however, exceeding the maximum of the penalty. Now, what is the basis of aggravating circumstances? Ang basis niya ay greater perversity of the offender because of, number 1, the motivating power itself. Example, dito sa paragraph 11 ng Article 14, that the crime be committed in consideration of a price, reward, or promise. So, binigyan ka lang ng pera, nag-commit ka na agad ng crime. So, you have a greater perversity. Binigyan ka lang ng reward, pumatay ka na kaagad ng tao. Then next, we have the place of commission. Like for example, sa paragraph 3 ng Article 14, when the crime is committed in the dwelling of the offended party. So, kinumit mo yung crime sa dwelling niya, kung saan siya nakatira. It involves greater perversity kasi doon siya nagpapahinga. A man's house is his castle. Tapos doon mo pa kinumit yung crime. And then, the means and ways employed. For example, sa paragraph 12, that the crime be committed by means of inundation, fire, sinunog mo siya, or sinunog mo yung bahay niya. Poison, nilason mo. Explosion, pinasabog mo. So, merong greater perversity of the criminal offender. The time of commission. For example, dito sa paragraph 7, nakalagay dito that the crime be committed on the occasion of a conflagration, shipwreck, earthquake, epidemic. So kung merong epidemic and nag-commit ka ng crime, it indicates na you have a greater perversity kasi you took advantage of the situation. And then, we have the personal circumstance of the criminal offender. Like for example, sa number 9, the accused is a recidivist. So magiging recidivist ka if at the time of your trial, you shall have been previously convicted by final judgment. Ibig sabihin, na-convict ka na for another crime under the same title or for the same crime. And then, nag-commit ka ulit ng crime. So it's an aggravating circumstance because there's a greater perversity on the part of the offender. And then we have personal circumstance on the part of the offended party. Dito sa paragraph 3, for example, the offended party on account of his rank, age, or sex. For example, yung age, 80 years old na, pero ginawa mo pa rin siyang victim. So there is greater perversity on your part as the criminal offender. Now, there are 4 kinds of aggravating circumstances, and they are generic, specific, qualifying, and inherent. Now, what are they? Generic aggravating circumstances are those that generally apply to all crimes. Generally, pwede silang maging present sa lahat ng crimes. We have paragraphs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, 10, 14, 18, 19, and 20. Now, the opposite of this is specific aggravating circumstances. They apply only to particular crimes. For example, yung paragraphs 15, 16, 17, and 21. Etong sa paragraph 15, present lang siya sa crimes against person. Dito sa 16, malinaw naman, di ba? Commits any of the crimes against person. So, crimes din siya against person. Dito sa 17, it applies to crimes against chastity and persons. And then, dito sa 21, it applies to crimes against person. Kasi naturally, dito, it refers to physical suffering. So, syempre, dapat crimes against person. Now, what are qualifying aggravating circumstances? Those that change the nature of the crime. For example, sa killing of a person, di ba? Sa Article 248, which is the crime of murder. Kung mapapansin ninyo itong 1 to 6, ito yung mga aggravating circumstances na makikita ninyo under Article 14. Except, itong outraging, hindi nyo ito makikita sa Article 14. So, itong 1 to 6, makikita nyo sa Article 14 as aggravating circumstances. So, kapag present ito, sa pagpatay sa isang tao, magiging qualifying aggravating circumstances sila. Ibig sabihin, it will qualify the crime to murder. Kung hindi sila present, pwedeng homicide lang. Pero kapag present sila, it will qualify the killing of the person to murder. Kaya sila tinatawag na qualifying aggravating circumstances kasi they change the nature of the crime. Next, we have inherent, or those that necessarily accompany the commission of the crime. Now, when you look at Article 62, sa number 2, nakalagay dyan na, the same rule shall apply with respect to any aggravating circumstances inherent in the crime. Dito sa the same rule shall apply, ang same rule na tinutukoy niya is dito sa number 1. Ang rule kasi dito is, it shall not be taken into account for the purpose of increasing the penalty. In other words, sa inherent aggravating circumstances, dito, it will not increase the penalty. Kasi, it accompanies the commission of the crime. What are the examples? For example, yung evident premeditation. So, it accompanies the crime of robbery, or theft, or estafa, adultery, and concubinage. Ibig sabihin, pinag-isipan talaga nila. Nag-reflect sila sa commission ng crime na yan. Kaya, it necessarily accompanies the commission of the crime. So, it will not increase the penalty. Now, what are the aggravating circumstances which do not increase the penalty? Meron ba yun? Aggravating circumstances sila, pero they do not increase the penalty. Kasi nga, na-mention natin, di ba, sa definition ng aggravating circumstances, they increase the penalty as an effect. Aggravating circumstances dito, they do not increase the penalty. So, ano-ano ba yon? Aggravating circumstances, number 1, which in themselves constitute a crime. And number 2, aggravating circumstances which are included by law in defining a crime. So, saan ba natin makikita yan? Dito sa Article 62, same rule kung saan makikita natin yung inherent aggravating circumstances. So, dito sa number 1, malinaw na nakalagay, aggravating circumstances which in themselves constitute a crime or are included by law in defining the crime shall not be taken into account for the purpose of increasing the penalty. Kaya, these are the aggravating circumstances which do not increase the penalty. So, ano ba yung mga examples niyan? For example, sa paragraph 12, fire. Diba kapag gumamit ka ng apoy, that's arson? Therefore, it is punished under Article 321 pag gumamit ka ng apoy. Kaya it is no longer an aggravating circumstance but a crime in itself. Or by using explosion, that's punished under Article 324, crimes involving destruction. If you cause destruction by means of explosion, you will be liable under Article 324. So kapag gumamit ka ng explosion, it is already a crime in itself. Again, kapag yung aggravating circumstance na yon already constitutes a crime, for example, yung sa fire, it is already a crime kasi ang paggamit mo nun ay arson. Hindi niya na i-increase ang penalty kasi it already constitutes as a crime. Ibig sabihin, may sarili na siyang penalty dahil crime na siya. Kaya hindi niya na i-increase ang penalty. Now, about sa number 2, anong example nito? Included by law in defining a crime. For example, under Article 299, robbery in an inhabited house. Mababasa nyo dyan na itong robbery in an inhabited house, it can be committed by any of the following means. Through an opening not intended for entrance or egress. Ang ibig sabihin, unlawful entry. Or sa number 2, by breaking any wall, roof, or floor, or breaking any door or window. So kung mapapansin ninyo, these are aggravating circumstances under paragraphs 18 and 19. Unlawful entry. Yung a wall, roof, or door, or window is broken. So ang ibig sabihin nito, they are already part of the definition of the crime. At kapag they are already included by law in defining a crime, they will no longer increase the penalty. Kasi part na siya doon sa crime na yon. And then number 3, we have yung diniscuss natin kanina, inherent aggravating circumstances.